Hello, good day everyone. So welcome to episode 34. So tonight we will have another young person to be on, and that is Noor from Lepak Conversations. And Lepak Conversations, I believe they started a couple of years ago, an Instagram page managed by two people. One is Juliana. Hi, Yuli, and she was my guest last week, and the other is my guest this week, and she is the one who will be talking about Lepak conversation. So last week was by a person from Lepak, but she wasn't talking about Lepak conversation. So today it will be about Lepak conversations, and we will be speaking on how it started, why, what's the relevance, and some other questions, hopefully interesting questions. And by the way, I need to do a correction. I said last week Yuli was my youngest guest. I think I am wrong on that because I did have Megan on and we did a couple of hours on the cabinet reshuffle. So Megan is my, so to be technical, Megan is my youngest ever guest. But these two are pretty young as well, Yuli and Noor. And Steffi says, please tell everyone to subscribe. Yes, please. Please subscribe. And this is available on YouTube and on Spotify as well. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in and we will get to as many as possible. It doesn't have to be questions, can be comments as well. And so feel free to come on. Okay. I need to. Hi. You can say hi, then please go.
Hi.
Okay, bye-bye. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Can you
I,
can you
I
hear
thought,
me?
yeah. I thought I was the
Okay.
one using the boomer mic, but
No.
hello. So how are you? How are you tonight?
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Looking forward to this.
right. Okay. So I wanted to say that Noor is also a lawyer. She's training now,
Not
and
yet. Yeah.
not a full-fledged lawyer yet, but she graduated already and she's completed everything that needs to be completed. So congratulations on that, by the way. So the first question, let's start off light, right? So what is Lepak Conversation? What does it stand for? Why did you start it? And why the name as well? I mean, we can get to that later, but why did
Mhm.
you start it and what's the purpose, the reason for existence of Lepak Conversation? Oh, the Mufti joined. Hi, Mufti. I hope he
Okay.
stays. Yeah.
Okay. So, Lepak Conversations is an online platform, but we mainly operate on Instagram and we share about issues that relates to the Malay or Muslim community or that we think the Malay or Muslim community should be concerned by. And we started around election season in 2020, and Anna and I, we were both first-time voters. So we were very passionate about the issues and we wanted to get involved. And I'll get to why we started with our first topic being the Tudong issue later. But yeah,
Oh, it's gonna get spicy tonight.
yeah, so apart from the reason that it was election season, because we started around July 2020, I also had recently done a research paper for a uni module, and it was on the development of the Malay community in Singapore. And in the course of my research, I found a paper that was written by my professor, and in his paper, he kind of wrote about how the Malay community developed from the colonial era and things like that. But he had some problematic conclusions in there and things that he said that weren't very nice. So in my paper, I wanted to address that, and I
Such
was
as
gonna.
what were those problematic views? Yeah.
So one of the things he said was something like, oh, because the Malay community strongly believed in like communal values and like kampung spirit and things like that, they weren't as occupied with earning money, or like they
Right.
weren't as occupied with like wealth management and things like that. Yeah, and that was just an assumption he made, in which he based off his paper in like the later parts of his paper. So I sent that paper to Anna to kind of vet through to make sure that I wasn't being too harsh on my professor because he was going to be
Right.
grading the paper
Right.
anyway.
Right.
And I still needed to pass the class. So then Anna read it and she realized that a lot of the things she was reading about, she did not know about. Things about the Malay community, things about how things were framed in Singapore, like the narrative surrounding the Malay community, and why we were lacking behind compared to other communities, or why our development wasn't as fast paced as the other communities. So Anna thought that it would be valuable to share these things, to address these things and reclaim that narrative, talk about it from our perspective, instead of letting people who talk about it from, from the outside looking in, and then they make assumptions,
Right.
so yeah, it would be better for us to talk about it ourselves. So that was
Right.
kind of
So
the
so
reason
what
why we
was the grade you
started.
got? What was the grade you got for
I
that?
got an A.
Oh wow, wow. So your professor is a professional then. Yeah,
I
and
mean,
he
I
was
don't know if
willing
he
to
marked it or if it was the TA. It could be the TA. I
okay.
don't know.
All right,
Yeah,
all right. Okay. So
yeah. This
I
this
won't
wasn't
ask
a
you
law professor. Yeah.
right. I won't ask you to name the professor. I don't know who it is as well. All I know is
Mm.
you are from SMU, so and that person is not from law, so these are clues already. But if you want to name him, go ahead.
No, no.
Yeah. Okay, so it was quite accidental, fortuitous, I suppose.
Mm.
And you said you used the term reclaiming the narrative, right? So it's in regard to the cultural deficit hypothesis that you were alluding to that your professor had, or what is the narrative that has been lost that you need to reclaim?
Um, yes, for sure. There were influences from, Myth of the Lazy Native, and then from Cultural Deficit Theory by Lili Zubaida Rahim. So, I guess the main narratives would be the ones about it is super broad, but the development of the Malay community in Singapore, why we were lacking behind in terms of like education, for instance, or our home ownership rates, or things like high rates of crime, health outcomes. Like these have all been framed in a certain way without, I think, without proper context or without proper
Right.
acknowledgement of other factors that are at play. So, I mean, we haven't gotten to tackle all of these issues yet on our page, but that's definitely in the pipeline. Yeah.
Okay, wow. Nice. So I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned the racialization of everything, the economic outcomes and the health data, for instance. I wanted to get your thoughts on it, but we'll get to that in a while. Because you said a lot of things in there. But I just wanted to ask why the term Lepak conversations? Why that name?
Yeah, so even the word lepak, I mean, if you think about it in the most neutral terms, it just means to chill, right? But lepak with the negative connotation that actually most people use it in that way,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is, for people to laze around, to do
Yeah,
like good for nothing things. You would
yeah,
often hear it as like, oh, look at the Malays
yeah,
lepak
yeah, yeah,
at the void deck. That's the
yeah.
context you usually hear it in, right? So part of why we chose that name was also to again reclaim that narrative, redefine the word. And to
Right.
us, to lepak is to, yes, chill with your friends, spend time with your friends, but also to be able to have constructive conversations about issues that matter to you, lah, whatever that may be.
Right. I thought it was really clever, by the way, the term lepak conversations, right? Because I thought it was subverting the meaning, right? Or the
Mm.
not the meaning, but subverting the general understanding of what that term is, right?
Mm.
And when you think about lepak, you think about few Malay boys, usually boys, in a void deck, at a void deck, playing guitar, smoking maybe, right? But then here you have two young women,
Mm-hmm.
young girls who are pretty intelligent and eloquent and using the term. So I thought that was pretty clever. And by the way, the term lepak does mean a few things, right? Actually, it means chilling out and spending time with your friends, right?
Yeah.
So if other races do it, it's it's spending quality time. But if Malays do it, then it's lazing around, right? But also there are other terms, right? Lepak also means if something is very funny in colloquial Singaporean Malay, then people say, oh, it's lepak, say, right? Or if you are really tired and then you crash, right? Then people say, oh, dah lepak, right? So it means a lot of things. But the understanding is that, oh, lepak one corner, right? Essentially. Yeah, okay. So thank you for that. I thought the term itself was also really smart. So you hinted at this already, right? The idea of internalized racism. When you said the term lepak, right? Do Malays themselves use it in that pejorative manner, you think? Or you think it's...
For the most part, no. But then you also hear parents saying things like, balik sekolah, or like come back from school, you better don't lepak with those friends, you better come back and study, or like you better don't hang out with those people. Lepak in the sense of don't hang out with those people for whatever reason. So I think it's still kind of used, but maybe not so much by young people. I think
So
young
is that
people do use it as like a hangout.
right? So is that a manifestation of internalized racism? Or what is internalized racism to you? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so internalized racism, okay, official definition is acceptance of negative stereotypes about one's own racial group. But I think, so a lot of the work we do at Lepak Conversations is also not just about raising awareness to people in other communities about the Malay or Muslim community. It's also about doing the internal work, because we realize that a lot of people from our own community have internalized or believed these negative stereotypes. And the clearest, I guess the clearest way of explaining this is perhaps to give an example. So if you talk about internalized racism in the context of education, so there's this stereotype that Malays are bad at math. So on an individual level, Malay students, I know a lot of Malay students, even me at some point, I would believe that, okay, Malay students are just bad at math, like no matter how hard I work, I'm just not going to understand this. And it becomes sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So you used to believe this, you think? You used to believe this last time?
Yeah, I used to.
Right. Then, okay, sorry. Yeah, continue. Yeah.
So that's like on an individual level, and how internalized racism manifests on that level and how it becomes harmful. And then you have it on like perhaps the family level or like your social circle. So again, in the context of education, you have Malay parents whose kids maybe do fairly well in school, who would then tell their children, okay, don't mix with the Malay students, don't mix with the Chinese students, because you know, Malay students are perceived to be less intelligent, not motivated to study, lazy. And again, these are all stereotypes, right? So you see that happening on that level. And then on the societal level, you have numbers, you have statistics talking about how our rates of like uni grads are still low compared to other communities, or like somehow the results, Malay students just don't perform as well. And on the societal level, the internalized racism happens more insidiously, because people think that these are based on facts and figures, so they don't see it as like a stereotype. They're like, these are facts, these are not stereotypes that I came up with. But people don't realize that these like statistics are viewed in isolation or are presented just as numbers on its own. You don't take into account things like, okay, what are these students' socioeconomic background? What were their parents' level of education? Did they have access to certain resources? You know, and these are things that matter, that affect your learning outcomes, affect how well you do in school, right?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely,
because we look at these numbers and we just think of them as facts, it's a lot easier to just internalize that and then just do the lazy, ironically, the lazy thing of, you know, believing those things to be true. So that's, internalized racism at different levels.
Excellent. I think that was a very clear explanation. So you know, the pernicious thing about stereotypes, it's really confirmation bias, right? So if you have that belief and you pass by and you believe that Malay boys are the ones who are always lepaking, right? When you pass by a group of Malay boys at the void deck, then you'll think, see, the Malays are like that. But when you pass
Mm.
by a group of Chinese boy, you'll never think that because it doesn't fit your preconceived notions, right? So, I definitely agree on that. But if I were to push you a little, so would you be in favor of abolishing race-based data? So, university education by race or health outcomes by race. You are in favor of that?
No, I think those should still be released because there is some value in looking at, not to parrot what the government has said, but there is some value in looking at where the issues are and like which groups need more help. But what I think is needed is more context to look at the causes or like why the numbers are that way, why there's a certain trend, and then presenting that together with the numbers rather
Right.
than presenting it in isolation. Yeah.
Right. I agree with you. I agree with you. I think I think there is utility to the race-based data, especially in some. I know some people disagree with this, but I think
Mm-hmm.
if a particular race is as an Indian person, I am more prone to heart disease, right? As Indians are. I would like to know that, right? I don't want anybody
Mm.
to sugarcoat that, and then we can find out why that is the case, right? Or what we can do. But I do also agree with you that to really buttress that data, right, and considering our multiracial society and considering the perceptions people have, right, I think you should have the socioeconomic data alongside it as well, right? Which we do
Yeah.
not, right? We do
Yeah.
not, right? So it's very easy to view everything through the lens of race, right? Which may or may not be accurate, right? But we'll only know if it's accurate if we have more data, more indicators, right? So in order to isolate which are the actual variables at play,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I definitely agree with you, right? So your focus is mostly you are by and for the Malay community, you would say?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
so Malay Muslim community, right? So you use that
Yeah.
that terminology as well, right? So would you say that Lepak conversations is to so we'll dial the temperature up a little, okay? So do you think Lepak conversation is too liberal for the Malay or Muslim community? So maybe you guys are not in step with the
Mm.
median Malay or Muslim.
Yeah. I mean, because the Muslim community in Singapore is not a monolith, right? Like they fall somewhere on the spectrum, and we fall somewhere on the spectrum, depending on the issues also, right?
Mm.
So we might be more liberal on certain issues and more conservative on certain issues. So I can't really answer this question fairly, I think, because we've had people from the conservative side who had issues with the things we were saying, but we also had people from the liberal side who were saying that, oh, we aren't pushing the boundaries enough, So I don't think it's fair for me to overgeneralize and
Oh
answer
wow.
this
Oh,
question.
that's a
It
very
depends.
that's a
It
very
depends.
politician answer. Uh, okay, so maybe I can push you a little, right? So you said it depends, right? Depends on what? What is the issue that you are more liberal on? What is the issue that you are more conservative on? So DeLorean Flight asks, what is the topic today? So it's a general conversation on Lepak conversations, what they stand for, and what are the issues that are closest to their hearts. Yeah. So back to the question, right? What do you think? Okay, maybe you can give one issue where you think you are more liberal than the median Malay Muslim, and then one issue where you perhaps you are more conservative than the liberals would like you to be.
Okay, so so I think a good example would be to refer to the report that we put out. So we had like 6 issues in it. So when we spoke about faraid, which is like Muslim inheritance law, and we spoke about female genital cutting and polygamy. So on those issues, we were more liberal.
Okay.
And then on the issues of divorce, underage marriage, I think we took a bit more of a conservative stance. And then for our tudung issue, I think it fit just nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the tudung issue probably is
Yeah, yeah.
something the both the conservatives and liberals can get behind, right? So
Mm.
uh so so then where do you position yourselves on this? Oh, so it's really issue based. So do you look at an issue and then think about, oh, where is the median voter or median Malay Muslim on this issue, and do I need to consider the community sentiments, or do you just go with your own conscience, thinking what is right and forget about forget about what people are thinking? This is what we want it to be, and this is how we are going to push it.
I think for us, as long as we do our due diligence, that we check with the relevant authorities or like the
Who's the
people
relevant
who,
authorities?
so people who we think are supposed to be a bit more knowledgeable on these issues than us, then and we know that whatever we are saying is not wrong, be it religiously or like the theory or whatever, then we will go ahead. Because if we start taking into account what the community sentiments are, then we would end up censoring ourselves. And yeah, you just can't push for change that way. Yeah.
Okay. So you wouldn't say you are representatives of the Malay Muslim
No.
community. So you don't try to represent the Malay Muslim community, right? So you are activists more than representative.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think that does clear things up, right? So although you managed to skillfully avoid answering that question directly. Okay, I'll let it pass. So you mentioned that if you start thinking about other people, what people are thinking, then you'll never be able to say anything, right? So I feel that way as well, but let's take the conversation to a broader level, right? So I feel that way as well. So what are your thoughts on cancel culture and woke culture, where it seems like people do want to make the boundaries, especially from your generation, right? And maybe there's a generational gap here as well. So slight generational gap. So where people they seem it come from good intentions, but they try to push the boundaries of acceptable discourse narrower and narrower. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a fair characterization?
I think what you said about like wokeness and cancel culture is like one issue, and then I view the issue of like narrowing the boundaries of acceptable discourse as a separate issue. So so for wokeness and for cancel culture, I think first of all it's important to kind of acknowledge where these terms came from. Like they didn't come out nowhere. The word cancel and the word woke, they are appropriated from the Black community, and from that culture, from the civil rights boycotts in the 50s and 60s. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because even in Singapore, when people talk about cancel culture and wokeness, that has been lost in most of the conversations, which isn't fair. So yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that first. And then in terms of wokeness, I don't think there's a very clearly defined meaning for it right now. It's just used whenever someone feels they are being attacked for a certain stance that they are taking, and they then call it like the woke mob that's attacking them. And then
But surely you can identify a person who is more woke than another, right? You don't think so? You really think the definition is so amorphous that if you put two people side by side, you cannot identify which one is more woke?
In the way that you are using it, I'm guessing the term means progressive to you, right? Like
No,
woke meaning
not
progressive.
necessarily, right? I would say it's a subset of progressives. I wouldn't use progressives and woke interchangeably, right? So, but I think it's a subset of certain progressives, and it's also they may be cultural progressives, not necessarily economic progressives, for instance, right? So wokeness, I refer it to a specific subset of cultural progressives. Would that be fair, or you think it's it's still a term that is just used to cancel other people, basically.
I think woke isn't as controversial as cancel culture, because
Okay.
I mean woke and cancel is usually used together, right? It's like,
Right,
oh,
right,
the
right,
woke
yeah.
mob is canceling someone, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
cancel is the
Okay,
more
yeah, yeah. So let's get
problematic
to that.
term,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay, let's get to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think cancel culture, people on the left, progressive, whatever you want to call it, would say that it doesn't exist, and that the term is just made up by people who are worried or do not want to be held accountable. And people in this group would just say that it's about accountability. And so cancel culture doesn't exist. That term is just used to avoid accountability. And then people on the right would say that, oh, cancel culture for sure exists because there have been people who, have lost their jobs or whatever because of
Yeah.
cancel culture, right? And they would also, and now a lot of them also have a problem with the word accountability, like what is accountability? What's the extent of that, right? And for me personally, I think it's all about power dynamics. If it's an individual person with no real power or anything like that, then it's too extreme to want to go after the person and like hold the person accountable by making the person lose their job or get deplatformed. But if it's someone with really a lot of power and influence, and that person is spreading a lot of harmful ideas, then I for sure agree that that person needs to be deplatformed, and that is
Deep,
what accountability would look like.
deep platform meaning what? Taken off social
So
media and
whatever platform that person is using to spread these harmful ideas, then get the person off that
who
platform.
gets to decide? Who gets to decide?
The community that was harmed by that person's ideas. It's difficult
Uh,
to discuss it so generally, but I for sure
okay.
have like, an example.
So sure, maybe you can give an example, then maybe we can concretize it. Yeah.
No,
Or
if I mention the example or the person I have in mind, then it's like cannot. But
then what? We'll be cancelled. Is it?
but I mean, okay, like Joe Rogan, for instance, right? That's the
Yes, let's
most
go there. Let's go
recent
there. Yeah.
example,
Let's go
yeah.
there. Yeah.
So people were saying that he should be deplatformed, especially because he was
Oh,
spreading things
Mariam
about.
Jaafar has joined us. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Hi.
yeah,
Hi, Mariam. Yeah. Yeah. Carry on.
yeah.
Carry on. Yeah.
Yeah. So because Joe Rogan was helping to spread like misinformation about vaccines, and we are living in a pandemic, and it has like
Mm,
real harmful effects. Like people could literally die. Like that's the worst thing you can imagine, right?
sure.
And so people were saying that it's super harmful. He's on a platform where he can easily get deplatformed, and it's just a matter of the management of that company deciding whether to do it or not.
Right.
And then there were people on the other side who were saying that it's all about discerning for yourself, like
Right.
what's the right
What do you
content.
think? What do you think?
I think he should get deplatformed.
Oh, really? Okay. So
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, he invites different people, right? He invited the CNN chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, right?
Mm.
So he invited them. So if you want to use this standard, right? Because I mean, Joe Rogan, is somewhat an easy target, right? Because he does so many episodes. He has so many different people on,
But we
So
have that
see,
here also. We also have that here where like influencers who also have like a very
sure.
um
Exactly. I
type
know
of
who you are
guests,
referring
right?
to.
Yeah.
I know who you are referring to. But my point is, right? So CNN has spread misinformation before, right? New York Times has spread. I mean, New York Times. Jon Stewart said that when he was against the Iraq War, New York Times was the one that was for the Iraq War. And by your standards, Jon Stewart would have been cancelled at that point in time. But history has proven that he was actually on the right side of history, right? So doesn't it worry you, the fact that we are using power to deplatform people just because we disagree with them, we are judging, and even if they are wrong on something, right? Is the answer deplatforming? And aren't you, as a content creator, as somebody who deals with controversial stuff, you don't think that if you start using that standard that it will come to bite you?
No, okay. I guess, like, full disclosure, I'm very idealistic, so that probably influences a lot of my stances and like my moral standards. But I think that it's it's the decision to deplatform and the effects afterwards are two different things, because we've seen people like really try to deplatform someone to completely discredit them, but because these people are in such high positions of power, right, it doesn't work. They
Right.
eventually just move to a different platform.
Understand, yeah.
Whoever supports them will move with them.
Sure. I understand
So
that will happen to Joe Rogan as well. So I'm not worried about Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan can take care of himself, right? I'm worried about people who do not have ideas that conform to the mainstream, but do not have the power and influence of Joe Rogan. These are the easy targets. Joe Rogan is just out there. I mean, he will move to a different platform. Using this standard, it can easily be used against us, right? You don't think so?
yes, but that's why I said that in at the beginning, right? I said it's power dynamics, right? It really depends on how much power the person has, how much influence the person has, and whether or not it can be used as a learning opportunity. I think if a person is truly apologetic, right? I mean, of course, there will be people who say that, oh, this person's only apologizing because he or she has to. But I think
Got
if the
caught.
person is willing to apologize and try to learn from it, then that person deserves another chance. But you do have people who just double down and are not apologetic, who just want to continue doing whatever it is they're doing because they know that their controversy will just get them more supporters, viewers, whatever it is that they want, or more attention. And in those cases, I think it's quite clear that they should be deplatformed. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, for sure there's some gray areas, but I think for that first category, it's an easy answer for me.
It doesn't seem like it's an easy answer from your answer. So, who decides? You said the community that is harmed. So if I decide, and what is that category that you're talking about? Is it based on gender, based on race, or what is it?
As in the community that was
Because
harmed,
you said
or
earlier, who gets to decide whether somebody should be deplatformed, and then you said the community that was harmed by something. Basically, uh, when you are saying that there is somebody who is the community that is harmed, and they get to decide, right? So what is that based on? What is that community that is being harmed based on, right? And who
the
within that community? When just now you said that Malay Muslim community is not a monolith, but now it seems like in this answer there is a monolith of any community that gets to decide, right? So if, let's say, a black person decides to go on Joe Rogan, because subsequent to that he had a controversy about the N-word, right? And then there are some black people who feel that he shouldn't be cancelled. Should their views be heard, or should the blacks who feel that he should be cancelled, should they be heard? Who becomes the arbiter in that? So it doesn't seem like it's an easy answer to me.
yes, there's for sure some gray area there. Yeah, I mean, I think people who are upset, they all feel like, that they've been harmed by this in whatever way, their views should definitely be heard, be taken into account. And I want to say you have to look at the size of it as well. And I don't just mean like, okay, if they're a minority, their views shouldn't be taken into account, but if it's a sizable group of people who have voiced that, they've been harmed by this, that something needs to be done, that he needs to be held accountable, then I do think that the offender, that the person would have to take some steps to, be responsible for it. And for those who did not feel offended or harmed by it, then they can continue supporting Joe
But
Rogan or
but you're
whoever
not calling
that
for
is.
that. You are not calling for that. You're calling for deplatforming. They cannot continue supporting him. It's not as if you are saying that let him be. Whoever doesn't want to listen, don't listen. You are saying that he should be. The platform should be taken
Yeah,
away from
so
him.
as in there should be steps to hold him accountable if there is a group of people who are upset, but it's not a large enough group for whatever reason for the platform to feel that, it warrants the person getting deplatformed. But there should still be steps in place to show that there's some steps being taken to ensure that this doesn't happen again, or to acknowledge the feelings of the group of people from that community who have been hurt.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
said there's a gray area. I feel like everything is gray about this. Like, what is the
That's
number?
true.
What's the number that of people who are offended? Then that person should be deplatformed. Who gets to make that decision? And do we really want to put that power in the hands of big tech companies?
Mm.
Do we really want that? Isn't that even more worrying than putting such a decision? And what do you think? Governments will just sit back. They'll be happy to say, yes, we should jump on this bandwagon, and then let's cancel the people who, and they'll hide behind some veneer of morality. Or I guess my worry is, don't choose. So basically, you do not believe in free speech, or
No, oh my gosh. No, of course I do.
well, it seems
um,
like if you are calling for deplatforming, I'm not sure how does that square with belief in free speech then.
um, I think I know we differ on this, but I do think there should be limits to free speech. In terms of things that are really, really harmful, like violence or things that incite hate.
Violence, I agree, right? So violence is pretty clear what calls for violence, right? But then once you move in, right? Once you move
Mm,
in, because just now you used the word feelings, I think probably twice, right? So once you move into the arena of feelings, right? People can be offended, or people's feelings can be hurt at anything, right? So do you think that's a viable standard to have? Like, if you hurt X number of people's feelings, right? I think I'm sure you have hurt some people's feelings also, right? With the FGC post,
mm,
right? And what if
yeah.
that's the majority of Malays? Then should you guys be cancelled as well, right? So I guess and they say, oh, we are hurt because you are invalidating a traditional belief held by Malay Muslims for hundreds of years. Then would that be a valid argument to deplatform you and get you off Instagram then?
Okay, maybe maybe in maybe in the instances where it's a bit more gray, then perhaps deplatforming is a bit extreme. But I still think that because cancel culture, to cancel someone, it's to voice how you no longer wish to support someone who is espousing something that is harmful. But whether or not that has an effect is a different thing. But the power lies in that collective voicing out of no longer supporting that person. And if you manage to get the organization responsible or big tech companies or whatever to take some action to hold that person accountable, I think that's ideally that should be the minimum. But if you, out of that collective voice, if you manage to get the person deplatform, if that is what that community feels is justified, then I think that's also fair. So I think it really depends on whether you get it or not, but the gist of cancel culture, the way I see it, is still that collective power of the people like voicing out when they choose to no longer support something, rather
Right.
than the effect of it, whether the person gets deplatformed or
I
gets.
understand. I understand. Yeah, yeah. So thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to add, and then we'll move on, that there is power dynamics in this as well, right? And it may
Mm,
not be power dynamics in the political or authority power, in terms of authority or political power, but there's cultural power as well, right? And now
mhm,
cultural power is on the left. The left is on the ascendancy. I believe that the left has pretty much not won, but they are on the ascendancy in the culture wars, right? But that doesn't mean that it will be like that forever, right? And if
mm.
the shoe, I mean, if it was on the other foot, and we, I mean, people on the left are now on the receiving end, right? Then I fear that this standard cannot hold up. Like I fear that we are setting ourselves up for failure if we hold this standard. Final word on this, and then we'll move on. Final word from you. Anything you wanna add? Yeah.
I guess I can kind of agree with you on that because I do, this is like my personal take, but I think that people on the left do generally have like higher moral standards than people on the right.
Oh
So we
wow!
do hold,
What a
I think
generalization.
yeah, as in, I just think that we do hold ourselves to a higher moral standard, and then we are quick to cancel people from our own side as well. Whereas people on the right don't do that as often. So then, yeah, it's kind of like a double-edged sword for
Right,
us.
right. So,
Yeah.
I would agree with you. There's the narcissism of small differences on the left, right? So there's that. I would hesitate to say that people on the left are more moral than people on the right. I think I
No,
think
not more moral. We hold ourselves to a higher moral standard. Yeah. That's different
that's
from more moral.
that seems like that's euphemistic. Okay, I would say that I wouldn't dare go there as well.
Mm-mm-mm.
I wouldn't dare go there as well. I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy on the left, a lot of
Yeah.
hypocrisy on the left that we've witnessed. Like, look at what's happening now. I mean, there's a lot of people on the left who are
Mm-hmm.
talking about the Ukrainian issue, which I completely agree we should, but
Yeah.
they are the ones. These are supposed liberals, right? Who are saying, "Oh, this is a European country. We never expected that." I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's outright hypocrisy, right? So,
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's a higher moral standard. But in any case, okay. So thank you for that. I thought that was a really good discussion. So let's move on. Intersectionality, right? So that's something that you guys are often talking about, or you guys have brought up before. So, can you explain to people who are older, right, what that means, and why does it matter, right? Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so intersectionality originated from Kimberly Crenshaw. She's professor, I believe, from the US. I think she did law. So just to make sure I don't misquote her, because intersectionality I think has been misused, misquoted quite a lot.
It
So
has. Yeah.
yeah, like just to read from what she says. So intersectionality, I'll just read this first before I kind of explain it.
Yeah.
So it's basically just a lens for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. We tend to talk about race, gender, class as separate parts of our identity, but what's often missing is how some people are subject to all of these, and the experience is not just the sum of its parts. So that's what Kimberly Crenshaw has clarified. So to put it simply, intersectionality is just a way of viewing certain issues and to view them as things that overlap, and that when they overlap, it's not just like one issue plus one issue equals to this.
Right.
It can be worse because of the way the two issues interact with one another. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, can you give an example in Singapore, for instance?
Yeah. So I guess on our page, we talked about intersectionality when we talked about feminism. So a lot of people can talk about feminism, like women's rights, and women deserve more equal rights and things like that. But oftentimes people don't talk about the racial aspects to it, the socio-economic background of a certain woman, and how they are more disadvantaged, or they face worse forms of discrimination because of that, those other parts of their identity. Yeah, so if you look at the gender wage gap here, I'm not sure if there's been any like studies to look at it in terms of
There
like
has so
race and
the oh no on race no yeah there isn't
so there is statistics on like the gender wage gap, right? But not
yeah
on how
right
much less Malay women earning, how
right
much less Indian women earning, and
right
these
right
are important numbers we should be looking at these numbers, or even if we want to look at like issues to help mothers, you have to look at like, okay, what about single mothers? What about mothers who are also taking care of like elderly parents? Like one criticism of intersectionality has been that it's too narrow, or it zooms in too much. But I do think that there's a lot of value when looking at solutions or policies to look at these various identities, so that you don't end up forgetting about certain communities or certain groups of people. Yeah,
right
so
right
that's the relevance of it. Yeah.
right. Thank you. I thought that was a clear explanation, right? So if I were to ask you, right, so a lot of times some of these may intersect, right? Some of these more vulnerable identities, right? But some of them do not, right? Or some of them compensate for the other, right? So the Malay experience, right, is not a monolith, as you said. Maybe the upper class Malay, right, or those in the higher socioeconomic status, right, may have far more in common with the Chinese from the higher socioeconomic status than a Malay from the lower socioeconomic status, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, would intersectionality be how would it work in those cases? Because it seems
Um,
like we are assuming that there are all these marginalized identities,
mm,
right? But within
mm,
this, which I completely agree with you with
mm,
the earlier part you said, but within this
mm.
there's a bit more nuance, right? Then
Yeah.
yeah, so maybe
So
the white woman
I
experience may be closer to the white man's experience in some cases than the black
mm,
man, right? Or black woman. Yeah.
yeah. I think there's been a study in Singapore. I can't remember the title or the authors right now because I took it in like one sociology module. But so there's been this study that looked at if education level is equal, so they're all uni grads. You look at four different groups: Chinese females, Chinese males, Malay males, and Malay females. And you look at their social capital returns. So you would expect that the Malay woman would have the lowest social capital returns because women are more disadvantaged in general, and Malays you would expect to be more disadvantaged than the Chinese for whatever reason, right? For various factors. But the study actually showed that Malay men had the lowest social capital return, which was surprising. But I think the study found that it was because of certain stereotypes associated with Malay
Yeah.
men that were
Yeah.
more harmful than stereotypes associated with Malay women.
Yeah.
So that's a way in which you see a bit more nuance that
Right.
doesn't mean women are generally more disadvantaged, that they would be at the lowest rung of the ladder all the time. So
Right.
that's, I guess, one way in which you can see the value of like studying these intersectionalities, and taking on
Right.
that lens.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, no, that was useful. Thank you so much. I mean, even in the States, right, black men would be punished more
Yeah.
for the same crime than, of course, white men, but also black women, for
Mm,
instance, right? So,
mm,
so it is a bit more nuanced than that. So, I guess even within, and I don't wanna give credence to the anti-Chinese privilege argument, but where they are right is is the idea that not every person within that identity group is privileged equally, right? But nobody
Yeah.
makes that argument. They are refuting a straw man, right? So nobody makes that argument. Yeah, but thank you for explicating the nuances, right? So just one final question. We've already gone 50 minutes already, right? So do you have time for 10 more minutes, hopefully?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So cultural appropriation, right? So it seems
Mm.
like a big thing, and I think you wanted to talk about it as well, right? So what is it, right? And where do we draw the line with regard to cultural appropriation? Where does the line stop at when it comes to celebrating somebody else's culture and then appropriating someone else's culture?
Mhm. So we on the Lepak Conversations page, we did like an entire series on this.
I saw, yeah.
So yeah, so again, start with the definition. So cultural appropriation is defined as the adoption of co-opting, usually without acknowledgement of cultural identity markers associated with or originating in minority communities by people or communities with a relatively privileged status. So if I kind of shorten that, it's like you copy paste something, but you never give any acknowledgement or
So
credit, and you
plagiarize,
don't,
basically.
yeah, like you don't even understand what you're copying. Yeah. So that's essentially what cultural appropriation
So if
is.
I
And
copy and I acknowledge, that wouldn't be appropriation?
I think there must be a purpose to it. Like, I mean, you can't just copy and then acknowledge and be like, oh, I know this is from this community. That's not meaningful acknowledgement, right? Yeah, it depends on how you acknowledge it.
So if I want to wear, a person coming to my wedding, for instance, a Chinese person, and he or she wears the kurta, right? So would that be cultural appropriation? So they didn't ask me
Um,
for permission, or they didn't tell me they were gonna do it, and when they took a picture with me they didn't say on stage, or didn't say that, oh, this I'm acknowledging that this costume is traditional Indian. So would that be cultural appropriation?
I think based on that context, no. So in those contexts, usually the friend does it out of respect or just out of truly appreciating, because
Right.
in Indian weddings, in Malay weddings, we do don our traditional
Yeah.
outfits. So I think in that context, it's okay. Even if, for instance, you go to a funeral, there are certain like customs that you must follow.
Yeah.
If you go into a place of worship and you want to show respect, you use the tudong, for instance. That is also okay without having to ask, because your intention is clearly to show respect, to respect that part of somebody's culture, religion, or race. And yeah, so there's a question here about what is meaningful
Yes. First
acknowledgement,
Wambo
right?
asked, what is
Yeah.
meaningful acknowledgement? Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, I'll have to like briefly explain it here, but on our page we have like a legit like list of like prompts to ask yourself about why you are doing this, if it's
So
really
please
necessary
follow
for
Lepak
you.
Conversations if you haven't. No, I genuinely mean that it's a good page to follow. So yeah, sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, so like on that list we actually ask people to ask themselves like, why are you doing this? Are you really doing it out of respect? What part of the culture are you appreciating? Because if it's not necessary, and you don't know how to acknowledge where this came from, or at least acknowledge the significance of it, I think the lowest bar would be to acknowledge the significance of whatever it is that you're borrowing from somebody else's culture. If
What
you
if
can't
they
even
want to
do,
wear? What if they want to wear it just to look nice?
that's appropriation.
Oh, really? You think so? So
Yes.
after they acknowledge, oh, this is an Indian dress. I'm wearing it because I want to look nice. That's not meaningful enough for you.
No, because especially because in most societies, the minority community is still very much discriminated against or oppressed, or their cultural identity or cultural markers are still not fully accepted. And then when people choose to don certain costumes or borrow certain parts of that culture to look nice, then it's really cherry picking. So there are, like, for instance, I think in Singapore it's very hard to grasp this idea because we've always grown up with like Racial Harmony Day, where you just wear
Yeah.
other people's traditional
Yeah.
costumes, right? And to you that's okay. But I've had like incidents where people from other communities would borrow their Indian friends' sari or their Indian friends' kurta or the baju kurung, and then on other days they would make fun of like the friend's oily hair or the
Yeah.
friend's bindi.
But it's the
So
letter that is wrong, right? Why does the letter have got to do? Why does it have to got to do with the first one?
because if you don't, it's like the saying, like, if you don't accept me on my bad days, you don't get me on my good days. It's like you don't get to cherry pick um parts of my culture that you think are beautiful to you.
But by definition, if you are not from that culture, you will be cherry picking on some days because you're not from that culture. So you cannot embrace the culture in entirety, right? So at
Yes,
any
but
point in time, you will always be cherry picking if you decide to cherry pick at all.
when I say cherry pick, I mean cherry pick what to accept and what to respect. So if you're going to choose to accept and respect and like certain parts of my culture, like my traditional outfits, then you also have to be able to understand and accept other parts of my culture, rather than just use whatever is advantageous to you. Yeah. So I think that's again, this is not something that's very clear. It depends on the individual person who's dealing with this person who's trying to borrow. But I think, to me, looking at the examples that I've seen, the line between appreciation and appropriation really lies in you being able to fully understand and respect that part of the culture. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you can't even understand that part of the culture and you're just taking it for your advantage to make yourself look pretty or to make yourself look good, then you're not where's the appreciation?
But the
Yeah.
fact that they think it makes them look good, there's some form of appreciation there, right?
No, you just appreciate that you look good in whatever it is that you're
Yeah,
wearing
but
or
why is
borrowing. You're
that?
not
Why do you feel you look good in that? That's because you appreciate it, right? There's some form
um
of appreciation, right? You wouldn't wear something you don't appreciate, right? Or you don't if you don't you feel like you don't look. I would be more worried if they thought, oh, I would never look good in a kurta, for instance, right? Wouldn't that be more worrying to you? Or
as in, if you,
by the way,
like, that's the thing, right? You
everyone looks
appreciate,
good in a kurta, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
like, there's a difference between appreciating the physical aspect of it, like how it looks, and appreciating like the significance of it and the significance of that part of the culture to the community or to the person that you're borrowing it from. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. So there are a few comments here. So Muzin, I don't know what's her real name. If they genuinely want to appreciate the cost. Okay. So if the genuine want to appreciate the costume is restricted, is that considered gatekeeping? Right.
Sorry, if
So
what?
if that person wants to appreciate the costume, but
Mhm.
other people are restricting it, is that considered gatekeeping, and would that hinder the spread of cultural appreciation, for instance? Enchi says, I think intention matters to make a caricature of the culture or to respect the situation. But how are we able to check if one's intentions are genuine? Angie says, you can get a henna tattoo if you pay the artist. For instance, example, right? So they're not gonna, if you go to a pasar malam, and they're not gonna stop you from doing it if it's not your cultural appropriation or appreciation. So basically, Angie continues. So basically, we have to erect barriers to cultural appreciation and gatekeep how people partake in our culture. And Fast Wambo asks, so it boils down to the intention. That would be hard to judge, right? And it seems like it's on such a case by case basis that we can never make any definitive judgment on anything on cultural appropriation if it's really based on intention and personal motives.
I think yes. First of all, yes, intention matters, and secondly, it is difficult to judge and assess a person's intentions. But and I think on those like very personal cases where you're dealing with like a friend for like a personal occasion and things like that, that's probably really up to the person. But if it's like a big thing, something that's being done on like a big scale, so what comes to mind is probably I can't remember right now that the name of the company, but some like cashback advertisement or something where they had a group of dancers don the traditional like Indian outfits, and then there was like Bollywood influenced music, and it was nowhere near Deepavali, and it was like there was no reason for them to do it that way. And I think Kumar was involved in the ad, but in that clip that was being spread around, he wasn't in it, and then the dancers were also non-Indians. So
Okay.
yeah, that
Right.
I think was a clear, and even that was a lot of people were talking about it, and people were saying that okay, that's not really cultural appropriation. Like some people were saying that it's not. They were just appreciating the music and the outfits and the culture. But to me, that was a clear instance of cultural appropriation because there was no purpose to it. They were perhaps profiting off people who like the music, people who like the aesthetics of it, but there was no explanation for it, and it was just used with no context.
So
Yeah,
in that particular ad, which I assume is what, a 1 minute ad or something, what
I
what
think
what would have needed to happen for you to not consider that cultural appropriation?
first of all, it wasn't like during any time near any of the festivities that
So we can only don those clothes near the
I mean,
near the.
you can not know, but if you are doing it in a certain way, like if there's like a very obvious cultural aspect to it, then I think there should be a purpose to it, like a clear purpose to it, and explanation for it. Because if not,
So I'm
yeah,
thinking
like
about how to concretize it, right? So from that example, so if it was done what mostly by Chinese dancers, that one?
mm,
Or yeah.
yeah, I think so.
So if it was half Chinese, half Indian, would you consider that cultural appropriation?
Um, I don't have a clear answer,
Right. So,
but
and if there's an explanation at the side, like this dance was choreographed by an Indian dancer or an Indian artist, as in, I'm trying to get at
mm,
where is the line, right? Because I really don't know, as in,
yeah.
I'm really learning about
Mm.
this. So, uh, and
And
do
again, disclaimer, I'm not the like authority
no,
on
of
this,
course,
but yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but it's fine, yeah. So we are
Yeah.
working our way through it as well,
Mm-mm.
yeah. So, I definitely understand the intent because
Mm.
I've seen cases before. Okay, I'll give you an example of, I don't know whether whether I'll use cultural appropriation, right? But you know where when Deepavali, and I really hate this. I really cannot stand this. And then there'll be non-Indians just putting their hands together and then shaking their heads, right? Now that for me is not even cultural appropriation, right? That for me is just outright racist because you are
Mm.
mocking people, right? So there's that. But other than that, if people come with genuine intentions and they want to dress, uh, they appreciate our dressing or what, is it wise for us to turn them away, for instance? China Wombok said involve a member of that culture to ensure its portrayal is respectful and accurate. So I don't know about sensitivity consultants, but I definitely agree with that, which is why I asked. So let's say if that dance was choreographed by an Indian, for instance, and it was all Chinese dancers or Malay dancers, would that make a difference? Or what if half of the dancers were Indians? Would that make a difference?
I
So
think
I'm trying,
again it's
yeah,
the purpose and the intention. So I think the the best or like the ideal situation, right? If we take your example, so there's an Indian person who choreographed this, and
yeah.
the intention, and it's clearly stated that okay, so this like famous Indian choreographer did this, and then we got people from other races involved to learn the dance, to kind of learn about the culture, to better understand the dance, and to pay homage to this culture or this particular group. And
But that's
so
not the purpose of ads, right? Ads are to make money, right? So there
exactly.
is
So if
no
you are going to make money out of this using someone else's culture, and you're not going to let people from that culture get, be part of it, be rewarded to it, you are diverting that
right, right. So
payment,
so
yeah,
so
to
which is why I asked. So if let's say the choreographer was Indian, then that would be okay then?
but then why not get Indian people to do the dance? Like why get people from other communities?
So it would need to be Indians doing it as well, right? Because
Yeah, and
I'm
unless
pretty
there's
sure, I
a
don't know what ad you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure it's to show some multiculturalism. I mean, knowing how Singapore is, right? Like everybody wants to show how multiracial they are, and they're
mm,
always, So I guess what's the difference, right? Between, I see this all the time on my feed. People giving something to their neighbors, and then they are taking a picture and putting it online during Chinese New Year, for
mhm,
instance. A Malay neighbor gives gifts to the neighbors, and then they put it online. I don't see a difference.
mhm.
I know exactly what they are doing. They're trying to pretend to show the world, not pretend, to show the world that they are multicultural and multiracial. What's the difference then? That person is also, I wouldn't call it cultural appropriation, but you're clearly taking advantage of that situation to project yourself and position yourself as this multicultural champion to get more likes and to get shares, right? What's the difference between that and the ad then that we are doing?
I mean,
That
in
ad.
in your example, if it's really like a like festive season to celebrate that occasion, I think like people were saying, like you can't really determine their intentions, but that picture alone, there's nothing disrespectful or wrong. Like yes, maybe you can question their intentions, like or maybe they're just trying to show off. But for the ad, there's just no purpose to it. Yeah, like there's no purpose, or like there's no way I can construe it as like you are appreciating the culture or the costume, because it just came out of nowhere and no context. And the thing that they were promoting, I think they were really just promoting the app. It was like a cashback um
Mm.
app. So
So
yeah.
Steffi just send me the ad. So is this shop back?
Yes.
Yeah. Shop back is the company. So I included so it's a 15-second cut of a solo on TikTok. Uh, so it's a fake Bollywood song or whatever it is. So I mean, I need to take a look. But I guess if they say, oh, I mean, Chinese, I mean, we also celebrate this all the time, right? When we see a Malay doing lion dance, for instance, and then we celebrate that as oh, this is multicultural Singapore, right? Do
Hmm.
we not? Or right?
Yes,
So
yes,
if a
yeah.
Chinese does an Indian dance, I mean, they don't need to explain for us to know that they are projected. Of course, ultimately they are corporations. I mean, I never put faith in corporations to promote values of a diversity or whatever it is. But that's all they can do, because ultimately the purpose is to make money, right? So if their ostensible purpose is to show this veneer of multiculturalism, is that not enough for you? Or there must be a disclaimer there explaining the context behind that dance? Or
um I think, to me, for that particular example of the ad, what was particularly problematic was that there was yes, first of all, there was no context to it. There was no reason for it that was apparent. And then the second part of it was, these are dancers who were getting exposure, who were getting paid. And there are people from the Indian community itself who can do the dance, who are talented enough, who deserve that exposure, who deserve to get paid, and yet they are not in the ad. So why not? This is part of their culture. So yeah, that was also another part that I found quite problematic.
Right.
Yeah.
So, do you worry that if we set this standard, right, then nobody will want
That's
to,
the that's the
yeah,
argument from the other side, right? Like that there's no way then for us to appreciate
yeah,
and celebrate
yeah,
each
yeah,
other's
yeah,
culture.
yeah.
Um, I don't think so, because I think cultural appropriation, there's also like power dynamics, and also like at what scale it's happening at, right? If it's just like your neighbor kind of thing, if it's just your
Mm,
friend, I think it's okay. But if it's happening on a much larger scale, and it's taking away opportunities, or is mocking the culture in some way, or replacing people from that culture in some way, then that's where it gets problematic. And I don't think if we start to talk about those issues, it will stop people from just appreciating cultures in general. Yeah.
okay. Uh, would you say there's a possibility of people being more circumspect when they want to do something then? I mean,
Yes, but I think
but
that
it may
that's a
be a
good.
good thing, right? It may be
Yeah,
a
I
good
think
thing.
that's a
It
good
may be
thing.
a good thing. Yeah, yeah. So, thank you so much, Noor. I've taken up too much of your time, and I really learn a lot, especially during the cultural appropriation segment, because I am not sure whether I have fully understood it prior to this. I need to work through these ideas. So, is there anything else you want to say or you want to plug? What is Elsie's plan? What are
So
Elsie's plans for the coming year?
this I can't say for the coming year, but for this month we'll be tackling the halal food issue, in
Ooh,
response to,
halal food
yeah,
in NTU or no?
in
General.
NTU, in schools,
Oh,
in
really?
schools
Oh,
in
wow.
general.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll be focusing about on schools in, schools in general, and like, halal food availability, what is halal
Wow.
food, and halal
Yeah, because there was
certification, and
there was. Is it because of the mothership article on that, and that's why
yeah,
you're.
it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
in response to that. Yeah, because we were on a
Okay.
break last month. Yeah, so we will be
Okay.
talking about it this month.
Right. Okay. All the best, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I still cannot believe the two of you are really really young. So such maturity at your age, and I really appreciate the work that Elsie does. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you
No,
for
thank
having
you.
me.
All right, no problem. Good night, everyone. Okay, bye bye.